Hello and welcome to the final episode of AARPG Leftovers Season 1. My name is Matt, and I will be stepping in for Sean, who once again has unceremoniously decided that he should do vacation and family time instead of the show. And I am joined by my lovely assistant, Vanna Tier, who will
Hi.
be
I'll be
helping
playing
me
the
out.
part of Matt tonight, who would be assisting Sean, but now I'll be assisting Matt.
That's right. And we are joined by the author of the Emmy nominated for Best Game TTRPG, His Majesty the Worm. Josh, hopefully get the last name McCrowell.
McCrowell. Yeah.
McCrowell.
Hey,
All
thanks
right,
for having
excellent.
me. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. So normally this is where Sean would turn over to me to do announcements for the show. But we're basically getting ready to take our summer break. So this is, like I said, the final episode of season 1. We've got some great guests that we're trying to get lined up this fall when we come back on. And I think that the AARPG Live is continuing. Tier, I know there was a bit of a snafu this week with there was an uncooperative toddler involved in this Tuesday show.
I don't like to call Nathan that. It's not fair. But things happen. Life happens. Everybody knows that. You know that you're watching a bunch of parents that are squeeze this time away from their families, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But we'll be back next week with a slightly different cast for another session of Brindlewood Bay. I'll be rejoining the cast after my hiatus. Laura is stepping back for this episode, and we spin the dice when it comes to Kupo, but we're really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to playing Brindlewood Bay. Almost as much fun as I am looking forward to tonight and talking to Josh, because I'm really excited. You guys really picked a really good game and a really good system to close the season out. The season finale of Leftovers, I think tonight is going to be great, because I want to hear about where this all came from. I want to hear about some of the great ideas. I mean, I'm excited just reading about it. It makes me want to play. So I'll hand it back to you, Matt, and you can go into what you like to talk about.
All right. Well, I think normally what we like to do is like to introduce our guests to our listeners. So for folks who haven't met you, or maybe you're not familiar with your work, just go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of let us know how were you tricked into getting into TTRPGs?
Hey, yeah, my name is Josh McCrowell. Last year I put out a game called His Majesty the Worm. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Knock Magazine from the Merry Mushman, which kind of aggregates the top minds of the OSR movement scene. Movement's probably a stupid word, but I'm talking about playing elves, so just let me be stupid sometimes. Let me think. And your question was, how did I get tricked into playing RPGs? I've been playing RPGs for a long time at this point. I was 12, and I had just read Lord of the Rings for the first time, and it made me go into the adult section of the library from the juvenile. And I was like, how do I get more of this sort of thing? And my friends let me into a confederacy, this a secret club. We were all rural kids in the 90s, and the Satanic Panic was very, very real for us. They're like, hey, we play D&D. And I was like, the devil game? And they're like, no, here, check it out. So it wasn't just D&D. We had like Xeroxed copies of a couple games, no full game books in our possession. So we had to make a lot of stuff up. And that's how I got into role-playing games as a hobby. And I've been, kind of obsessed with the idea ever since.
Very cool. And over all these years, what are some systems that, sort of has stuck in your mind as, like, for whatever reason, like you had a great character in it, or you really like something about it? What are some of the systems that you've played that you still like to play today, or that you really enjoyed when you were getting into the system?
Yeah, so because I was exposed to the idea of kind of role-playing as itself a hobby instead of like one system, like, hey, we play, I use D&D as a stand-in, and I frequently do when I'm talking. the same way that a dad, I think, might describe every video game as a Nintendo, and I think that's fine.
Well, it is the benchmark for so many people,
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But I was introduced to the idea in a kind of a piecemeal way, like, hey, this is role playing. And here's some games that we have. The other main one that I got introduced to at that time, like that like moment, it wasn't one, it was like a couple. And the other main one was Shadowrun, second edition. And I realized, because I had this kind of like vertical tasting a little bit, like it's like you taste red wine and white wine. And because I got the sense that these two games were different, I could feel that game systems had a texture to them, had produced different play experiences at the table. So ever since like that first moment, I was really interested in like consuming systems and like learning what kind of systems there were. I have put a lot of time in just like testing out new systems, and I'm happy enough that like my friends are indulgent with me and also kind of like interested in that, so we can like check things out. I like, bizarrely, because I don't necessarily play it anymore, the game system I probably have the most like years in is like Exalted. Spent a lot of time in the White Wolf worlds, especially in high school. And yeah, for sure.
Everyone goes through a vampire phase.
Yes.
Some of us never leave it.
That's true.
Well, there's so many games that I still am in love with, but like I probably wouldn't stand up a whole campaign of them today, not because I don't love them, just because time's limited. I'm an adult. I got stuff to do. So I spent a lot of time in White Wolf in high school. I do have a regular like play testing gaming group where we like run small campaigns for each other of whatever we're interested in. Right now, we're kind of doing like a suite of games. We just played Break, which I thought was awesome. I really enjoyed Break. If you haven't checked it out, let me recommend it. Beautifully illustrated. It's a game in an OSR milieu. But it has really strong inspiration from like Japanese video games from like the 90s. And you can tell it was like this huge labor of love for people that like, loved Sorcerer Hunters and loved Final Fantasy and loved Akira and like put all that stuff in this OSR game. It's really, really cool.
Interesting. Never heard of it.
The thing about this hobby that is so interesting to me is how one, it is both niche, but also so broad that like you wander into like it's kind of like a house. So like, imagine like a mansion, and you're vaguely aware that there's a basement and like an attic and a second floor, but like you've spent all the time in the parlor or in the dining room, and like you go into these other sections of the house and everybody there is different. There's a different scene, there's different games. And I love that we're all in the big house together, but it's also really fun to explore it and find these different things. Because I feel like I have my finger on the pulse, and all the time people are pulling games out and talking to me about them. I'm like, I have never heard of this in my life. Are you kidding me? Like, and I think that's really cool.
I like to, say it's akin to what I did growing up. And, this is back before digital music. And, you think that you're into the greatest, like the greatest band, and it's the thing, but then you meet somebody else and they're like, oh, hey, check this tape out. Check this band, and the sharing of the music and expanding of tastes. And that's how I see it. But I absolutely can see it, like in the way you just described. I love it. I love being in touch with so many great creators, so many great players, so many enthusiasts, because they bring a different perspective than I ever would have. And I like to see that.
Yeah, totally agree. Matt, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it is, I am always shocked. Like we go to like Gen Con, right? Or any of these, even the smaller cons, there's just so many people creating, and it is not cookie cutter. It's not hundreds of people creating their own D&D, right? There's interesting and fresh ideas, interesting and fresh game mechanics, right? I would say visually, like the visuals, people are putting a lot of time and effort in how their products look, right? There's a lot of products out there that are as much of work of art as they are like written word. I think I'll throw like the Morkborg kind of design guys, right? But yeah, I am with you. Is this is why I like talking to folks, is because there's all kinds of things that I feel like I've played gazillions of games.
Yeah.
I haven't. I'm not at all. There's so many more. And we joke, Nathan always says he wants to try to play them all. That's his goal. But, Well, that's very cool. So I would say right off the bat, taking a look at some of the stuff from the press kit, caught my mind right off the bin was new school game, old school sensibility. So I think maybe different folks hear OSR and have different ideas, but like, I think I'd be just for the folks listening, like, what does that phrase mean to you? Why is that kind of the lead for this product?
Yeah, great question. So I was really, I have like played a lot of games, and I was really into, in the late aughts and early teens, the OSR scene was kind of getting going, or I, just kind of got plugged into it on the now defunct social media site G+. And some people there were making cool things, like extremely lo-fi. Very few people were making books. They were just making zines or blog posts. And I was like, oh wow, there's so much creativity here. This is the kind of gaming that I want to play. Like this is what I'm missing. This is the secret sauce. And there's, for people that are unfamiliar with the OSR, you have to do a little bit of double think, I think, when you're interacting with the scene. There's kind of two elements to it that kind of like live resonating with each other or informing each other. And one is a kind of spurious claim that it is rediscovering the roots of D&D, and certainly OSR games, especially the original ones, and the big popular ones, have a lot of rules fidelity with the very, very earliest systems of D&D. They're recreating, rewriting, the original Dungeons and Dragons rule sets much more beautifully, explained much better, because they were very difficult to parse originally. And that, because they're all doing that, they have a lot of fidelity with each other. So you can kind of take the best of each system and like grab adventures for different ones, and all of them are intercompatible. And so that's like one part of it. But it also is creating, I think, a very new type of approach to gaming that is really centered on player choice and an abundance of information from the GM as in an authorial stance, telling the players a lot. So, an example of this is that whereas D&D 5th edition might hide a trap behind a perception check, if you roll high enough, you can see a trap. The OSR play style asks the GM just to say, wow, you see a trap, and getting around the trap is the interesting part, but the information and the is being blasted. So it's like really high information, really high ability to make choices. So the play style and the rule systems kind of go hand in hand. And His Majesty the Worm is, what if you heard about the play style but had never read D&D before, and you made a game out of those kind of like OSR play style first principles? So the gimmick behind it, I was just reading a lot of blogs at the time, and they were collecting these house rules and kind of like best practices. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. I want to make a game like this. And the way that I make game, or the way that I like think about like, okay, I'm going to make a game like this for me and my friends, is I just kind of like write it down, and I couldn't stop. And eventually the book went to a printer and came out. So that's the story there.
Yeah, it's when I hear OSR, I think for me, I tend to think of like, old D&D, you rolled a character that had 1d4 hit points, yes. Right? So I think of OSR, I think of lethal, right? That's just me. Again, I think lethal, And I do think crunch, but not crunch for crunch sake. There's plenty of new games that have tons of crunch, or so it's not just that it has crunch, but it kind of takes me to this next part, because this made me laugh when I read this, because I thought this is going to take me back to my mom, right? So most it's like parents might introduce their kids to gaming. I'm the opposite. I introduced my parent to D&D, right? That's and she's the one who had introduced me to like Lord of the Rings when I was a little kid, right? So it's kind of, but she played solo. She didn't have anyone her age, right? It was, and so she came to me one day, she goes, well, this is really hard. She's like, by the time I've bought my equipment and I've traveled to the dungeon, I've eaten half our food and someone got hurt, I've only got one spell. So this is D&D like first edition, right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, and then they have to rest a day, and like so there was a lot of like, she was like, wow, the logistics are really hard. And I saw in this, you've got here tracking food and light, is very important, these kind of mundane things, but making it fun. And so I'm kind of interested how, because some people love this stuff and some people like I would love to like track encumbrance and stuff, but I can tell you how many times I've tried to institute that. People are like, this,
yeah. Tell
us, how do you make light and food and all that part of the system that's important, and how do you make it interesting and fun?
Yeah, great question. My experience, kind of before I had written this game, or like maybe like before I had started getting into the OSR, I had the exact same experiences. I had in my head, I read The Wizard of Earthsea, and I thought about, if you've heard, I recommend this book to anybody. The Tombs of Atuan is probably the best like fantastic fiction I've ever read. And it takes place in this like labyrinth under the earth, and there's a wizard named Ged, and he conjures a mage light and he can see some of the time, and a ton of the book is given without like any light description, so it's just like kind of tactile. Anyway, light really matters there, and I was coming into an expectation of trying to like play dungeons when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, when I was playing Pathfinder, and I would be like, oh cool, I can't wait to like experience that kind of feeling. And people would like, don't worry, we don't track encumbrance here. Oh, don't worry, you always have a light spell. And I was like, well, shucks, I kind of wanted to figure out like how it felt to be in a dangerous dark dungeon. I wanted to center those experiences. This probably, I don't think this is a controversial statement, but it said so simply that sometimes I think people forget it or aren't aware of it or don't put it first in their head. The fun thing about playing games is making choices. That's what we like about games. Whether you're playing Settlers of Catan and kind of like deciding how to allocate your resources there, and if you're playing like a video game, the choices you're making are usually like Twitch based, like how you like move your muscles. But like the thing that you're doing in a game that you like, that the human brain likes, your monkey brain likes, is making choices. If you can make the choices of encumbrance, food, light, interesting, that's fun. So if you have kind of limited resources, which you do in terms of like your pack space, even your hand space, what do you have in your hands when you're in the dungeon? Do you have a torch? Do you have a shield? Do you have a sword? Because you can't have all three. So like those kind of like micro choices are fun. And that's how I try to center those experiences of wonder of like the human elements. We're thinking about what it feels like to be in the dungeon as a real life person, and centering those choices is all about scarcity of resources and making choices around them.
That's very cool. I know in your system, there's actually a mechanic if you run out of light. It's not just it's not just a minor problem. It can be a major inconvenience or the end, basically. Yeah. So there you have. So what happens if people get out there and they've lost all their light sources? What are some, without giving all of them away, what are some of the things that can happen to a party?
Well, I wrote that rule because I wondered, like, if you were in at a table and somebody said, oh, you're 4 levels deep, there's 20 rooms between you and the exit, we don't have any more light sources, how maddening would that be to actually play out? Like, how frustrating would that be for everybody involved to have no choices, to have no information being given to you? So if you're actually out of light sources, You draw on what's called the We're Doomed table, and you're doomed. You have a 1 in 14 chance of like escaping okay, and over a 50% chance of like being consumed by the hungering darkness as Grus, move in and devour you. So you really are incentivized to like, and I don't think that's ever really, I'm not going to say never because I've been playing this game for 7-8 years at this point. And I've seen a lot of kind of like like edge cases happen. But frequently people don't run out of light. What they do is make informed decisions about, okay, we're running low. It's a risk reward. We have this much stuff. We've gotten this much treasure. Can we get any deeper? And, they make some considerations and they're like, at this point, based on the information we have, we better turn around and go back. And it feeds into this loop of like going into the dungeon, gathering treasure, fighting monsters, resting up, running low on resources, going back to the city. And that's the whole game. That's the gaming loop.
Right. And I think that's what we call it, like the 4 phases, right? There's like the 4. Yeah. I would say, I think this is brilliant, at least because I know just recently our gaming group has played in 2 different systems. It's been a long time and we've been playing a lot of games. I like to say like we're pretty good at, maximizing the system, but this is the first couple of games we've played where the party actually left. It's been a really long time since the party's left a dungeon and gone, okay, hold on, we need to recoup. Right? Like, this is not what we thought. We made some bad rolls. Someone almost drowned. And I thought I wasn't playing on those sessions, but listening to it, I was like, wow, I can't remember the last time, like playing D&D that I felt so threatened by like cold water that we had to like pull back. Right.
Oh,
we did another one too, where it was all about the resources. Like, how far could you go? And every action you took, do you want to search an area? There might be treasure, but you're expending some resources, right? And I saw in yours as you're exploring, the new core. In yours, I thought it's the first random encounter I've ever seen where some of the random events is that your torch gets weak, right? Like what'd you call it, gutter?
Torch is gutter.
Yes. So just the very fact that you could have a sudden breeze or something happen that cuts away that resource. That pressure, I think, sometimes is missing from a game. And again, I don't want to. I love D&D. I played D&D all my whole life, sure. But I know my co-host Nathan has a lot of complaints that it's got too many guardrails for him. That there's not a lot of this angst and pressure. And so you're right. The choice is always we go to the next room, right? We go. It's never like a real meaningful choice. We just press on, short rest, press on.
Right.
So that's just my take. So I guess I've kind of gotten down in the weeds. I probably should have stepped back. So for you folks, what is His Majesty the Worm? I guess maybe as a setting or as you're walking into this, what is the sort of the grand idea and setting for folks?
Sure. His Majesty the Worm is a dungeon crawler. It's my attempt to get at, and I alluded to this before, like an experience that I think I've chased for a long time and haven't been able to perfectly get, so I made it. But I'm really interested in dungeon crawling. I like that part of the game. And even in old school D&D, which is, frequently all about dungeons, and the OSR says it's all about dungeons. Even in the old school, you're supposed to age out of it eventually. Clerics get the ability to cast continual light and create food. And eventually you're supposed to move into this kind of like overworld conquering armies game, because it was, it comes from wargaming. And that happens even faster in more modern editions where light and food are very not things that we care too much about. I wanted to dungeon crawl, so it's a dungeon crawling game. There's very little settings. Light setting, there's an alluded to setting. It's the setting that I play in. I please make your own. I thought that if I was writing, it would be more interesting to write with the sort of proper nouns that I use, just because it sounds cooler. But there's nothing there that you can't change. And the essential gimmick of the sketched out setting is at the center of the world, there is a city, a great city that's very ancient. Think about Rome or Constantinople, something like that. And 5 years ago, a mythic underworld, a literal underworld where Hades might live, like opens underneath of it. And inside there's magical treasure. And adventurers go there to get really specific magical treasure, not because they're just hunting their fortunes, but because something happened. Their wife died and they're going into the underworld to play their harp for the Lord of the Dead to get their wife back, because there's nothing else they can do to get that specific outcome. And it's all about that like loop of like going down and exploring. I'm also like really influenced by Metroidvanias. If you are familiar with that video game genre, like Metroid or Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, I am not as much. I was getting Metroid mixed up with Metro. That like,
oh yeah,
right. I was like, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's imagine a campaign that just takes place in the dungeon, and there's enough dungeon there to keep that going. So, in my, and I think this is easier than you would believe. I really think it's actually pretty easy to make a pretty big dungeon, because it's all just a series of choices for the GM to make. They're discrete, and there's a set of them, and I walk you through them in the book. And if that isn't enough, because I sense some people's hesitancy, I made an entire like online course to help you make a dungeon. And a mega dungeon is just 5 regular dungeons in a trench coat. Put connections between them, and you have yourself years of play just in this one space. And it's not supposed to be one and done. It's a whole campaign where you go, you explore a percent, 1%, 2%. Then you've mastered those 2%, and it's a breeze. You can get past those next time, and then you're getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and you have years of play in this recurring dungeon under the city.
Well, that's right. So it is, so folks know, it's not like a set map, right? It's not a dungeon, right? There are like pieces, but there is a certain amount of sort of randomness, procedural. I know there's rules for like how to create a good, how to create rooms, how to create traps. Even the city that the people in, I was watching, there's an interesting mechanic. So it's not just that city, if I understand it, maybe I'm wrong, that grand city is going to be different for every group because it's generated in a using this tarot system, right? I mean, if you could explain kind of that concept, because I think that's another interesting thing, because no two groups or no two times you sit down and do this, it's not like you're going, oh, I'm always in water deep, right? It's like, so maybe you could just kind of let folks kind of explain generally that how that city is built.
Sure. So for both your city and your underworld, which are the two places where the game takes place, I have some systems. The rule systems actually are somewhat light. The book is it's downstairs. Shoot. The book is somewhat big. It's 400 pages, and you look at it and you're like, oh man, that's way too big. The rules stop after like page 50, and after that it's just tools to help people run games. And some of those tools are random generation tools to give you seeds to build your own content for your city and for your underworld. And you can do that by laying out tarot cards. You can lay out tarot cards for your city to see what districts are there, who's ruling the city at the present time. When you come back to the city, different districts can give you different bonuses if you spend time there. And when you go to the underworld, the underworld will have different connections and different stuff there. And I put seeds. It takes a little bit of brain grease for a GM to lay this stuff out and kind of set up their game. But I think it's good prep and it's prep that serves you for a long time. A couple weekends of work, if you spend 2 to 4 Sundays laying the cards out, do a little thought exercise, and like writing out the dungeons and the city based on that, I think you can play for years.
Very
So
cool.
you randomly generate it, and you can generate it not just like for the first campaign, but like because I played for a long time, kind of obviously. Sometimes if like, you know, if there was a TPK, I'd be like, okay, cool. Let's just like reset the city. We'll go 100 years in the future, see what it's looking like now, and it'll just feel different for us next time. So I would like regenerate some stuff between like these kind of micro campaigns if there was like a story beat that necessitated it, and it would give some freshness to the system just for, you know, the same 5 people.
Very cool. And you mentioned a little bit ago about like motivation, right? So a person's going to, you know, play this harp. That was, I noticed something in character creation that there's a bunch of different things I thought were cool. One is sort of the long-term goal, right? So characters can do work for other people. Characters can explore and just get loot, but characters also have some sort of a deep, you know, sort of motivation or a drive. And there's another thing called bonds. And I thought this is good. We've seen this in a couple other systems where, and I'm seeing a lot where it's just as important that this relationship between the people, the players, right? These characters. Could you talk a little bit about the bond system and how it works into the game?
Oh, for sure. Again, something that I was really interested about this game was like thinking about what it feels like for real to like be in a dungeon. And I do think that your interpersonal dynamics are something that I think is like really interesting. So everybody else in your party you have bonds with, and when and then there's a variety of bonds. You can be allies, you can be mentor mentee, somebody could be your boss, you could be rivals with somebody, you could be family members. And there's these little prompts for role playing, and when you check off that prompt, your bond is charged. And when you rest, you spend those charges to recover your resources. So the kind of like the better your morale, essentially, it is. The better your morale, you recover and heal when you're camping in the dungeon. So it does a couple things. It prompts and rewards role playing and story beats in a way that I think is interesting, and it makes you think. I mean, even just thinking about it and like writing out in a first person way, I feel this way about this person. I think is really, really fun. It reflects the sort of like fantastic media that I like. You know, if you think about the way that the crew of Firefly thought about each other, and how they had
That's
those,
a
like,
great example.
I just think that stuff is fun. I want to do it. Let me do it. And my players are already doing it, so let me reward them for doing it. Let me give them an attaboy. So that's the bond system.
And can those bonds change? Like, is there a mechanic for, like, let's say we're friends, then something happens and maybe now we're rivals or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. Is there a mechanism where that can shift in play? And also, are there any negatives or like, so it's good that you can charge, but is there something like if you and I are friends and then you get eaten by a monster, is there any kind of a repercussion or is it just that I don't have that bond to charge?
Yeah, good question. Yes, it can change. And there almost everything on your character sheet can be changed, because I think that in role-playing games, and we've all experienced this, you think this is going to be cool and it just doesn't work out. You think this power is going to be awesome, and yeah, you're not feeling it. And it is written into the rules because it's the way I play. Yeah, all this stuff can be changed. And there's also like little speed bumps. So when you have these different phases, like the camp phase and the city phase, you know, there's reminders in the text. Take a minute, think about what's happened, revisit your bonds. Like, is it time to upgrade rivals to friends? Is it time to upgrade friends to lovers? Like, think about it for a second. And if somebody is lost. There isn't a mechanical repercussion necessarily, but I think it's a great story moment. I think that having that written down on your character sheet, that person was your best friend, not just your ally, but your best friend, and they're gone. Like, because you have made the effort to write down best friend, what a role-playing opportunity.
Right. Much more impactful than, oh, well, Bob died. Right. It's like, that's very, very cool. So I'm probably going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to throw up one of these pictures because I thought this was good. So this is, if I can get everybody, so this is the city, right? So there's tons of dungeon, but I love the fact that sort of you have all these locations, but there's very like specific things that you can do, but none of them in themselves, I think, will detract from getting back into the dungeon again, right? Like, here's all these things you can do, but there's like a quick and easy way to do them. What sort of, like, when you were designing the different things you wanted people to be able to do, like what were some of the influences or the things that you thought would be fun, or what kind of drove this sort of creative set of actions? And which I just want to start right off the bat is death and taxes, right? And it's not on here, the things you can do, but and maybe when you talk about that at the end, talk about like the taxing system, because I think that's hilarious.
Sure. I think an important part of games in this even when you're just dungeon crawling, I think downtime actions, which is what the city is based on, are really fun and important for. I think there's some things in the game that make it feel like a long-term campaign, even though like individual characters might come and go. So a character might die, or a character might achieve their goal and retire. But the story is bigger than an individual character in this game. The story is the story of the world and the story of the dungeon. So more dungeon is being explored, and that institutional knowledge stays. The places that you've mapped and discovered, and big boss monsters vanquished, like that stuff remains even as individual player characters are dropping out and the roster is changing. Another part of that is these downtime actions, which you can do in the city, that allow you to further kind of long-term goals. So, you're building new institutions, you're making, the best mead house in the city for your character to retire to. You're creating the tomb that your character is going to be entombed in. You're making these kind of like long-term goals, and every time you come back up with a chunk of treasure, you're investing in your long-term goals, so that you have a city that you want to retire into. Like, because like the dungeon sucks, nobody wants to be there. Everybody wants to like one last job, get out, and live on the yacht, and you can set yourself up for that. And the thing that's like drawing you back from that is that every time you come back with physical coins, the city guard is going to hassle you and take 50% of your coins because the king needs his. That's why he allows this sort of like terrible trade of adventurers. I wasn't going to keep that in the final game, but it made my players play differently in a way that I thought was really appealing, where it put pressures on them, not just to sometimes go back to the city because they're in over their heads, but to never do a 5-minute adventuring day, because they're like, okay, well, if we go back, we're just going to be taxed to death. So we have to get at least far enough down to make it worth their while. And so there's both pressures to go up, but pressures to stay down too. And that really worked out. That was a happy accident.
That's very cool. No, that's good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the top line items for me just coming in, reading it, that, piqued my interest. All you need to play is a tarot deck. Can you give us a little bit, for the viewers at home, people are just learning about the game, what that means?
Yeah, sure. So in the same way that like maybe everything you need in D&D is just like a set of standard dice, the game uses one tarot deck. And And the GM uses, so if you're unfamiliar with the tarot deck, it's a type of playing card. So if you go to, you know, Eastern Europe or France, you'll see people playing the game tarot using a tarot deck. And it's just like a kind of like a non-standard playing card deck. There's 4 suits with a set of cards 1 through 10. And as opposed to a poker deck, there's 4 face cards instead of 3. And there's also a set of trumps or major arcana that are numbered 0 through 21. And you know, the basic game of tarot is a little bit like spades. It's a trick taking game. So in His Majesty the Worm, you use a standard tarot deck. The players use the minor arcana, and the GM uses the major arcana, which are the trumps 1 through 21. And so the book comes with as much advice as I could possibly think about giving new GMs about how to stand up an actual game the way that I run it, with a robust underworld and have these sorts of adventures. So the only thing you need is a standard tarot deck. They run you $20. You get it off Amazon, go to a crystal shop nearby, go to a Barnes and Noble, and then you have everything you need to play. And hopefully, you know, take 2 to 4 weekends to set the game up, and you can run it for years.
And I think there are some actual walk by walk instructions in the book, in the rules, that kind of show how that plays out for like combat and things like that. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Using the tarot deck is something that I think folks are probably the least familiar with, that concept. But I don't think it's, you know, once I was watching something on it, it seemed super, super difficult. I do like the idea of like having cards that you play that are kind of played hidden, that maybe you flip over as like a reaction. I think one is like to riposte or whatever, right? You can, and there's a lot of also strategy for like, I think it's initiative, right? So it's the lowest card. Well, you know, I'm not going to play it. I'll let you say. So there's some tricky nuance. Initiative's one of them. Tell them about that.
Sure. Yeah. In combat, the tarot cards are used in a different way. I mean, there's, you know, combat starts and you go into the subsystem. I like using cards in game design because, for a lot of reasons, they're persistent. You can have a hand of them. They're informationally rich. You know, a single tarot card has it can be upright or upside down. It can be face up or face down. It has number. It has suit. It has art on it. It's a very rich piece of game tech that you can do a lot of stuff with. So I think it was just interesting to like write for cards. It's certainly not the first card-based system. It's not the first tarot card system. Yeah. I just think they're like really fun kind of like things to play with. I'm
going to say this too. And when you handle tarot decks, and depending on like the kinds you get, but most of the ones that I've encountered in my life, they have a richer feeling. The cardstock is thicker. Mm-hmm. It's more elegant. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of the artwork can be unbelievable, like mind-blowing. Right. Depending on which ones you're not. You mentioned White Wolf earlier. I was in a World of Darkness game where the tarot affected my character very deeply. Yeah. So you can take as little or as much as you want from it, but handling those cards just it takes you out of the norm. For me, if I was playing Savage Worlds and I'm just using a regular card deck for initiative, that's, it's fine. Everybody has a deck of cards somewhere around their house, but the tarot, it's something special. So maybe something you don't encounter every day. And for some people, it's stepping out of their normal world and it's starting to get them into a different world. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it is an interesting, so the dice in most games, the dice are your fate, right? You roll good, you roll bad. It is interesting. I like the tarot concept because I was introduced to tarot, not so much like a card game, was reading tarot, right? My mom read tarot, so she had tarot cards. And so there's a sort of whether you, like you said, go to the crystal shop, right? so that kind of thing. So to me, it was that was an interesting connection with the idea of that, I sort of think of tarot as a way to read fate. And then, so here are these tarot cards in the game that are going to help you. Now you've got some determinism kind of how you use them, but there is still that, you don't know what the GM's going to play, right? You don't know if your card is, is it better to be higher or lower, or, so, yeah, it's an interesting system.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed why I chose tarot decks, because, like I said, I think cards are interesting, but when you have a tarot card in your hand and there's like that beautiful art and the card stock is better and it looks weirder and you're used to it for like these like crystal reasons, like imagine how weird it was in 1974 to be asked to roll a 20-sided dice. Like, this game is weird. And now we do it all the time. It's very easy to get a 20-sided dice. And I wanted to like recapture that weirdness. It just looked cooler. It's just a cooler card. So like that's why I chose the tarot. And people are like, do you use the interpretation and the meaning of it? And I'm like, I don't. And there's plenty of games that do. I can send you some supplements that like can help you make NPCs using that. People have done it better than me. That's not necessarily how I use them. They're just kind of playing cards to me. But they are cooler playing cards than a deck of 52 and playing solitaire. They're just cooler. They're cooler things. And I wanted the game to feel cool. So that's why tarot. Yeah.
So we've kind of touched around like the dungeon, the city, and some of the core things, I guess. So if I'm interested in playing, what are some of the roles that a player can take on? And that's kind of like everything from like, I guess what I would call like class to background to, what their racial, whatever, like what are the kinds of things that a person can play?
It's a game about dungeons and there's sometimes a dragon. So I don't think I'm breaking any new ground here. You have your fantasy archetypes. In terms of class, your stats are the suits of the tarot deck. So swords, pentacles, cups, and wands. And depending on which your highest stat is, you have a suite of feats that kind of like prime you to be a warrior, a thief, a scholar, or a wizard. Then there's kind of like the classic fantasy tropes that you know and love in terms of your kith and kin with humans and elves and dwarves and trolls and orcs. And you can be all of those. I think it's somewhat interesting that the way that you start is supposed to be fairly fast because, like Matt, you alluded to earlier, OSR games can be deadly. This game can be deadly. I've had a lot of, and I don't think that's bad. I think that serves the goals that I was trying to get to. So I wanted the character creation to be fairly easy, but there's nothing that locks you out of any other part of the game. So the bonds are really important. And one of the things that you can do at camp with your bonds is you get training from other people. So you can learn any skill in the game if somebody else at camp teaches it to you. So you start with a suite of them based on your highest stat, and then you're gonna grow your character based on what they're learning from other people. And the way that works is that you get experience points as you agree to your friends' quests with them. You get those up front, and then you spend them to use abilities that you don't know yet. And the more you do it, when you've done it enough times, you've mastered it. So just like a real skill, you don't know it perfectly, and you're gonna try it out a couple times, and then once you've done it enough, then you've mastered it, and now you don't have to spend experience to do it anymore. So you're gonna grow your character that way as you progress. But there's nothing. I don't think there's any surprises here. You're gonna be an elf wizard,
No, and I like the idea of getting some of the experience beforehand. And I'm not sure how folks when you've run it have role played it, but to me, when I saw that, I kind of thought, oh, well, this makes sense. Like if someone came to me and said, hey, I need to go rescue my cousin in the underwater lair of whatever, I'm going to probably go figure out how to swim.
Right.
And so
Okay.
I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but having the ability to spend some experience to maybe prep your guide or because I think what I saw too was at least this was someone's review, was like characters aren't, you grow in breadth,
Right.
sort of as you gain more experience, because it's really you're trying to be able to cope with a larger and larger number of problems and issues. You don't have to be the best archer in the world if you can't swim or climb a rock, or you know what I mean. It's like, so yeah, that's an interesting sort of mechanic. So I guess we're getting close to the end of the hour. There's so many other aspects in the game I haven't even touched on, like damage, armor, right? There's a lot of very cool mechanics. I do like the way I didn't think it seemed super deadly, but I also like the way that there's not a lot of it's not a complicated system, right? Like I think it's a dagger is just as deadly as a hammer if you get whacked with it, right? So there's kind of so I don't know if there's anything about any other system that I've forgotten. I haven't even talked about magic and alchemy, right? There's a lot in this game. Well, I will ask you the magic question. So magic, when you design the spell, so one of the comments I heard was there's not a lot, you're not going to find a lot of magic missile fireball, right? Kind of describe to me how you see magic as its role in the game. If it, a lot of people, it's like, oh, I want to, shoot magic missile at the darkness, right? You're not doing that. Kind of tell me your philosophy when you were creating the spells and the kind of powers and how spellcasters kind of are, how they interact with the world, change the world, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's two main goals. The first goal is to never invalidate the premise of the game. So, as I mentioned before, I think sometimes you can age out of dungeon crawling in some of the premier dungeon RPGs. You can get spells that make dungeon crawling essentially unfun. Once you can fly and water breathe and have continual light and conjure food, the essential dangers of the dungeon, space, time, darkness, just kind of like are bypassed. So spells shouldn't be able to do that. So that's one goal, and that's like a negative goal, but it's a goal. A positive goal is that I wanted sorcerers to feel magical. I didn't want them to feel like scientists. I didn't want them to feel like mutants. I wanted them to feel like magical. So when you are a sorcerer, you have packs of components. You have to have a component to cast the spell. And that's what and so it's just one of those resources. What do I put in my pack? Is it food? Is it light? Is it my components? So you have these like weird components, and they're things like a mummy's shroud, like poppets, and I have new toe dog, stuff like that. So you feel like a wizard because you're carrying around like a jar full of fingernails with runes on them. And those spells are doing weird stuff. It's not scientific. You can put someone to sleep for 100 years and they won't age a day. It's not like, and it's not in the world of like you put someone to sleep for 5 rounds. It's you put someone to sleep for 100 years until they're woken up. And if nobody wakes them up, they will not have aged a day. That makes it feel more magical. And so wizards have these broad set of tricks that nobody else can do. They have a lot of restrictions. They can't carry iron. And if they like F up their magic, they might get like a terrible magical disaster. And that makes them feel like wizards. So like when you have kind of like system mastery in this game isn't building your characters, like learning when to like pull the right lever, and everyone can do it, especially with the combat system. And it's kind of like Dark Souls. You kind of like get a rhythm. When you're like, okay, cool. I know that somewhere one of these like 12 items is the Lich's phylactery. I'm going to cast Magic Circle. I'm going to throw all of them into a hole and I'm going to bury them so that like their astral connection is cut off. Then you feel like a wizard in a way that I think is really, really satisfying.
Nice. Very
That's
cool.
awesome. Hey, Matt, while we're wrapping up, Would you mind posting the link so our viewers at home can view the game and understand about it? While I ask, hey, first of all, I'm going to say congratulations on the Ennie's nomination.
Oh, thank
That's
you. Thank you.
fantastic. I'm really so happy for you on this. I'm really excited about the game now. You've actually given me some really great ideas. You piqued my interest, makes me want to get into it more. So that's been fantastic. Can I ask, what's next on your plate? Do you have anything coming up? Do you have anything in the works?
For sure. I just released, like last week, I released the first official dungeon for it. It's called Shrines of the Lower Ossuary. And there's a ton of third-party stuff on the website at hismajestytheworm.games as well. I have another larger dungeon, dare I say a mega dungeon, coming out, I hope, sometime early next year. I'm also working on Knock number 6, the OSR gaming magazine. So I got a lot of projects right now in the hopper. If you really, the best place for all of my various obsessions is my blog riseupcomus.blogspot.com. You can see all the stuff I'm putting out.
Very
That's
cool.
great. Fantastic.
Yeah, and so speaking of the Ennies, I think voting's done, right?
Voting is
As of
done,
the 20th. They're gonna, and then the Ennies are on the 1st of August at Gen Con, and I'm assuming you're gonna be present.
Not this time.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, good luck.
Yeah,
I mean, that's outstanding to be nominated for like best game, right? It's not like best written side quest. No, it is, and all the folks who are nominated, it's great. This is super awesome.
A lot of good people.
Good luck. Yeah, and any other shout outs for your folks that worked on this project, or anything you'd like to part with before we wrap it up?
I mean, broadly speaking, I'm just extremely humbled that I was ever nominated, and I super appreciate everybody that's checked out the game. And if you are making stuff for it, if you are putting stuff out on it, I can't thank you enough. If you are thinking about it and making stuff for your friends, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. It's just, I'm extremely tickled. And thanks for having me on. A very, very fun conversation. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks for being on. And no, you know what? I should have said this earlier. Another great trend we're seeing a lot is, this stuff is under, and I'm probably going to get the term wrong, open license.
That's right.
For creative, for commercial. And I think there's even a kit that's out there to help folks. So yeah. So if you are interested in this system, go out there, pick up the system. If you love this and you're like, hey, I want to add to this story, I want to add to this fiction, you can. And there's help, there's tools, and it's great. So we think that's great because it's just going to spur more creativity. So
yeah, thanks for making it available to everybody.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you everybody who came in. Josh, thanks for sitting down with us. This was a great way for us to wrap up our first season, and AARPG Leftovers will be back in the fall with more great guests, and who knows who's going to be hosting it from day to day. No, we'll be back to normal, a little more normal, hopefully. All right. Thank you everybody, and have a good night.
Thank you.